Metal is your net. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown, and today we are looking at some of the best heavy metal albums of 2019 so far. We are in the last week of June, and there's not really a lot of music that I really want to talk about, nothing that I can't cover quickly in my Albums I Missed video, so I decided this would be a perfect time to get into some of the best heavy metal of 2019 so far. And may I just say, so far it has been a hell of a year. It feels like almost every couple of weeks now that I'm thrown an album that really could be an Album of the Year contender. And it's great music from all the subgenres of heavy metal too. From the world of black metal, we've had some really great records from Devilmaster and Wormwitch. From the world of thrash metal, we had a great record from Flotsam and Jetsam, and Possessed put out their first album in 33 fucking years, and it was also a seriously damn great record. Just this month alone, we've seen some really great underground death metal as well, from Fetid, Superstition, Memoriam. You'll hear about some of those records again in that Album I Missed video. Speaking of death metal, one of my favorite records of the year, Samsara by Venom Prison. Holy shit. Obviously, I'll talk more about that later, but spoiler alert, it's high up on my list right now. Some great records from the world of prog rock and metal as well. The recent Thank You Scientist was awesome. Queensryche, a prog metal originator and innovator, put out one of their best albums in years. And speaking of which, I also gave a 5 out of 5 to Weeping Choir from Full of Hell, which makes this the first time I've given two albums a 5 out of 5 in one single year, and we're only halfway through the year. For the sake of context, the only other records I've given a 5 out of 5 would be Forever by Code Orange and Desolation by Chemist. So, it's not a score I hand out very frequently. Top that off with some high-profile releases from high-profile bands like Amon Amarth, Children of Bodom, and Sun. And yeah, it's safe to say 2019 has been extremely damn good so far. Hell, the year's been so good so far that honestly, if we decided to cut 2019 right about here, I'd have a full-blown best of the year list raring to go, like no objections, no changes required. But a full best of list is something we'll have to discuss at the end of the year. For now, I have 5 albums in particular that I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about, that I feel are the best records of 2019 so far. But first, let's go over a couple ground rules. 1. Only albums that I have fully reviewed on the Metal Meltdown are included on this list. Therefore, any albums that I have simply talked about or addressed in my Albums I Missed series, or albums I just haven't reviewed altogether, don't count, at least not for my list. It doesn't mean they're bad, it just means that I don't feel I have the necessary information to tell you that this is one of the best records of the year, and therefore I don't feel it's appropriate to include it on this at all. I know what you're thinking, Robert, that goes without saying, but there's always somebody who doesn't seem to understand that, so just let's make it clear one last time for the idiot in the back row who didn't hear. Secondly, and also quite obviously, this list is not definitive. It will very likely change before the end of the year. Secondly, and most importantly, this list is not definitive. It will very likely change by the end of the year, and frankly has changed quite a bit just in the last week that I've thought about it. With that in mind, let's briefly address some of the, let's call them honorable mentions that didn't quite make it into my aforementioned top 5. Those records being Times of Obscene Evil and Wild Daring by Smolder, Heaven That Dwells Within by Wormwitch, and Satan Spits on Children of Light by Devilmaster. All great records, all super fun. I own all of them on vinyl with the exception of Smolder, come to think of it. I play all of them regularly. They just didn't quite push it enough to get into the top 5. Of all of them, though, Devilmaster did probably come the closest to actually being in the top 5, if that helps. I honestly don't know. I feel like I should already be talking about this top 5. Let's talk about the top 5. So yeah, let's get right into it, and let's start with number 5 on the list, Tropical Depression from Florida Man, released May 3rd via Spartan Records. I love this album. It's just a collection of dirty fucking hardcore and post-hardcore and alternative and noise rock thrown into a blender and injected with sweet southern moonshine, man. Brimming with enthusiasm and pure punk rock fire. I even went as far as to call it a hidden gem in the world of hardcore and punk rock in my official review. And I even implied in my most recent episode of the Vinyl Record Roundup that this is kind of a must-have album for the summer. Because, you know, nothing says summer party vibes quite like in-your-face, abrasive, piss-and-vinegar American hardcore. Florida Man have also proven to be ever so gracious in returning that same love that I have for this band back to me. They've posted my review on their social media. They've commented on a couple things here and there. They left a really nice note in the copy of Tropical Depression as well that I think is just a nice, cute little touch. If by some chance you haven't heard this record yet, now's your chance. Don't sleep on this. It is maybe not the best album of the year, but it is the best punk album of the year so far. It really is quite that simple for me, at least. Number 4, Revelations of Oblivion by Possessed, released May 10th via Nuclear Blast Records. This is their first album in 33 fucking years, and they've clearly spent all of that time very, very hard at work on this record. It's sharp, it's vicious, it's totally in your face. The band is taking advantage of more modern thrash metal flavors, but that early, primitive proto-death metal sound still remains at the very core of this thing, making it all the more violent and hellish and powerful. We're not exactly talking about the most progressive or experimental songwriting within this genre, but they perform it with such confidence and enthusiasm and energy that I frankly don't care. Like, it seriously blows my mind that you have all of these retro thrash and death metal bands that really haven't even come close to creating a record as fun and well put together as this. That still checks off all the classic things that we look for from those retro thrash and death metal bands without sounding like a long-lost collection of shitty demos. It still feels relatively modern. It's a pretty fantastic balance of sounds and aesthetics, actually. I think at the time I gave this thing a 4 out of 5, and my love of this record has only increased since then. And to my surprise, that love even managed to reach Jeff Becerra of Possessed himself, as he commented on the official album review and also commented on a couple of Instagram posts that I made about Possessed on my personal page. Okay, maybe I'm gushing a little bit about this album because that inherently is so fucking cool. But it is, alright? Shoot me, alright? Shame on me for being a little selfish. Shame on me for giving into the flattery. Even with that aside, it's still a great record. I think most people have heard this album by now. A lot of people are also saying that this is an album of the year for them. But just in case you haven't, now's your damn chance. Number 3 on the list, and so far the only one in my top 5 that I don't own on vinyl, Weeping Choir from Full of Hell, released May 19th via Relapse Records. I said a lot about this album in my official review. I said that it was terrifying. I said that it was an extreme metal masterpiece. I said that this album was the physical manifestation of the great Dormammu himself. Spoiler alert for Doctor Strange 2, Doctor Strange is going to have to fight Full of Hell. Full of Hell, if you're listening, that's a great idea for a music video. Like, you guys dressed up as, like, Doctor Strange fighting off fucking weird-ass demons and shit. That sounds cool as shit. A little nerdy, but, like, the cool nerdy. We might get in trouble with Marvel, but only if they don't find out. And I don't know about, I won't tell if you don't tell, okay? Just say, just keep it on the I won't tell anyone, I promise. And I still agree with all of those things. This record is absolutely fucking insane! Unfortunately, because it is such a jarring, haunting, and extreme record, it does make it difficult to actually really come back to it. Not that you can't, and not that I haven't for that matter, but, you know, it didn't end up at number 2 kind of for that reason, because my number 2 album, I found that I replayed it more than this record, and replayability is, in my opinion, inherently more important. But that itself is a bit of a compliment when you think about it. The idea that this album is so masterfully horrific that it's actually difficult to come back to. Because let's face it, nobody wants to relive a nightmare. No one wants that. Obviously, this is another record, much like Possessed, that a lot of people are talking about, and obviously, as a result, you've either already heard this record or already heard of it. But if by some chance you haven't, dive into it. But do approach with caution. This is not an album for the average listener. Go into it prepared, go into it ready, go into it open-minded, and maybe bring a stuffed animal, something to hold really tight in this album's darkest and most haunting moments. Just a thought. I gave this album a 5 out of 5, and I fucking stand by it. Check this fucking thing out if somehow you haven't. Number 2 on the list, Samsara from Venom Prism, released March 15th via Prosthetic Records. Yeah, this record managed to beat Full of Hell for the number 2 spot, so clearly that says a lot about this album. While I didn't quite give it a 5 out of 5, I did lean bloody well close to it. And I have inarguably come back to this record far more times than I have Weeping Choir. To be fair, that's mostly has a lot to do with the fact that Weeping Choir is inherently a more difficult album to get into, but I digress. As far as this album is concerned, I would say that this is the best death metal album of the year so far. And again, we've had some really great death metal as of late, and we're expecting more great death metal. I mean, for fuck's sakes, Tomb Mold, coming hot off the heels of Manner of Infinite Forms, has a record dropping next month, and right now it sounds killer. It might even top this record at the moment. Who knows? But at this exact moment, the title of Best Death Metal Album still belongs to this. And it has a lot to do with the fresh ideas that Venom Prism bring to the table. The sound itself is a mixture of a variety of different extreme metal genres, influenced from deathcore, classic death metal, late 90s nu metal, bands like Slipknot, influence from some thrash and death grind. The sound mix on this is fucking incredible. I don't think I've heard a death metal album sound this good in fucking ages, particularly with the guitars and the vocals. It's just such a commanding fucking record. And the band brings a lot of different ideas lyrically to death metal. You know, death metal is usually about gore and Satan and violence and cannibals, you know? But Venom Prism is more interested in political and social issues. They're more interested in abortion and women's rights and modern politics. They're interested in things like mental health and self-worth, things that you, again, would not find on a death metal record, and it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel contrived, it doesn't feel like pandering at all. It feels really honest. You get the vibe that Venom Prism really care about what they're talking about. They know about what they're talking about, and it's conveyed so well through the music. With abortion and women's rights being pretty hot topics right now, this record obviously has gotten a couple interesting looks. I've read some comments on some reviews where some people have disregarded it as libtard metal. I'm not going to name names, but you know who you are. Which I think is absolutely fucking ridiculous, but then again, there's no point arguing with angry white men. They are undoubtedly the most stubborn human beings on this earth. If I were you, and I didn't know about Venom Prison, and I hadn't heard this record, and I read a comment like that, here are two things I would do. One, I would laugh, because frankly, the only people who use libtard in serious, unironic conversation are frankly a little fucked in the head themselves. Like, seriously, it's 2019 and you guys can't come up with any other insults than libtard? Come on. Like, if you're gonna insult me, be a little more creative. Come on. Secondly, and perhaps more obviously, I would just disregard it altogether, because once the record goes on, it speaks for itself. Metaltrist said in his review that he feels that this is what death metal honestly needs in 2019, and I would really agree with that. I think Venom Prison are paving the way for a different way of looking at death metal, more aggressive ways of performing and constructing death metal, and again, in the path of that, they have constructed one of the best death metal albums, if not the best death metal album of the year, and my number 2 at this moment. With that in mind, that obviously brings me to the number 1 record, and frankly, it should not be a huge shock if you've been watching the Metal Meltdown recently. It's Golden Grey from Baroness. This record is just under 2 weeks old. It was released June 14th via the band's own record, Braxton Hymns, and I can honestly say that I've listened to this record more than any record I've just mentioned so far this year, just within these 2 weeks. That's pretty crazy. And it's because, well, it's kind of a perfect record. It's emotional, it's delicate, it's intricately and articulately performed and composed, it's haunting, it's got a great aesthetic, its music itself is a fantastic fusion of psychedelic rock and prog rock and sludge metal and extreme music and indie rock and alternative and all these interesting aesthetics and ideas and concepts. It's the most personal record that Baroness has ever made. John Baisley in particular has never sounded quite this open and confident. And that openness and that confidence bleeds over into the rest of the band, as they're doing a lot more improv, they're playing around with a lot of new ideas, and despite all that, they still sound so fucking tight. In fact, this is the tightest they've ever sounded. Now, I have heard some reviews since I released my own review, where some people have been criticizing the sound mix on this record. The Anthony Fantano in particular was very critical of about the album's overall sound. And I gotta say, I don't quite see what you guys are talking about. I mean, to each their own, but I really don't see any personal issues with the sound mix. I think it's actually kind of perfect in some ways. And as such, I gave this album a 5 out of 5. Again, the second album to receive that score so far this year. Again, the first time I have ever given two albums a 5 out of 5 in the span of 1 year as well. I won't spend much more time talking about this record because the album review has only been up for about, again, just under 2 weeks now. So if you really want to know more, you can just go look at that review. But I want to reiterate one last time before we leave here today. This is Baroness's best album. It's their most ambitious album. It's one of the best rock and metal albums of the year so far, to the point where I could actually see this with getting some real mainstream success. I think it already has, for that matter. There's literally no other way I could possibly shove any more praise down this album's throat, so just do yourself a favor and listen to this fucking album if you haven't already. Oh, and listen to it stoned, because that is a wild experience. I mean, I won't say much more because I understand that in some parts of the world, smoking the marijuana is still illegal, but it is not illegal here in Canada, so therefore I did exactly that, and I had a pretty eye-opening and mind-melting experience with this record. So yeah, 5 out of 5, Golden Grey, #1 album of the year. Fucking fantastic, man. And yeah, I guess that's it. So yeah, obviously a fantastic year for hard rock and heavy metal and punk rock music. Let me know what your top 5 is. Let me know what some of your favorite albums of the year are so far. Is it similar to my list? Is it different from my list? Is it exactly the same? Is it totally 100% different? Do you feel like I missed anything? Let me know. I want to hear it. And as always, press that subscribe button to get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.